Let's walk through the process of managing a vendor. In this example, we're going to add a vendor into the system and then set them up as a vendor portal administrator if we want to collaborate with the vendor. Now there's a few different ways to do this. So in this case I'm going to manually create a vendor, but in procurement and sourcing we have the ability to sort of manage prospective unsolicited vendors. We'll look at them in other scenarios. So let's go and create our vendor, and we're going to call it parts supplier Ven for the sake of the exercise. So I'm manually creating this as the vendor. Not too worried in this example about the payment terms and all the details about the setup, just so that we can get through the process of the portal connection piece here. So I'm going to go and create a new contact, and on the contact I'm going to say that they're Charlie. Pink, for example, would be the contact. Now I need a contact to be the person that's going to be the administrator as the initial administrator. So if I add that contact information, I need an email because we need to send the contact an email to say that they can go and log onto our portal. Now in this case I'm not sending the email out, so it's just a dummy email address, but I'll show you where the email actually gets sent out, and then we can pick up the URL that would have been sent to the user as a one-time URL for them to go and authenticate themselves. Now specifically in this example I'm using AX 2012 R3 CU8, and there's a couple of differences that were added to improve these capabilities in CU8. So now that my contact's created, I'm going to save the contact, and we have up here the ability to add a vendor user. So I'm going to add a vendor user, and you'll see that it picks up the email address. Now the role that we're assigning is going to be the vendor portal administrator external, which gives them the ability to set up other users. So I'm going to add them to role, and then I'm going to hit save. Hitting save will trigger the workflow. So there's actually a workflow configured under system administration to control this user request. So I'm going to hit submit and submit the workflow. So if I close that out, when we go and have a look at procurement sourcing, we'll see under the vendor requests details we have vendor user requests, and under here we'll see that we have the one for Charlie created, and you'll see it's in submitted status. So this is the workflow working. Now this is actually the same details as we'll see under the system administrator user requests. So it's actually the same form details. I'll see the details here. Now you'll see that since I've changed over here, the workflow is executed, and now it says authentication pending. So that's because the workflow is running in the background. So while I'm in system administration, I'm going to go down to the email sending status here under periodic, and this is where the email should have been sent out, but it's not going to be sent externally in my demo environment. So I'm going to pick up the body of the message from here, which would have been sent to the user. It says, you can configure this based on the email templates in terms of what you actually say here, but the key point is that they get sent a one-time unique URL for that particular vendor administrator or the user that you're trying to allow access. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to switch over to another machine. So in this case, on my other machine, which is not connected to from a domain perspective, it's not connected to my other AX environment. So this is sort of simulating the vendor accessing the portal from an external machine. So I'm going to copy that URL that they would have clicked on from their email, and then I'm going to go and access that. At this point you'll see it's accessing the enterprise portal, and it'll take a moment to get started. Okay, so at this point it's going to ask me how am I going to authenticate? So I'm going to say Windows Live ID. So another video will talk about the authentication, the actual configuration behind this, but in this case I'm going to use Live ID. So this process is actually setting up the connection between that contact and their account that they want to use, for example Live ID account, and we're saying that we're going to trust. So in this particular case the authentication has actually been done because I've logged in to this machine as my demo user, so it's actually passed that authentication across, so we're actually authenticated now. So if I switch back to the workflow, what we'll see in the user requests is that this is now authenticated. Okay, now I'll just pause the video for a moment. So the next step is the workflow will run and actually create the user. So I'm just going to let that run in the background. So I'll pause the video for a moment. Okay, so when the workflow runs, you'll see that this is now completed. So the last step in that completion step is that the users actually added to the system. So if I go into System Administrator Users, we'll actually see the user here, which is Charlie Pink, and we'll see, for example, that they're set up as the portal administrator. If we have a look at the relations, then the relationship is connected to the parts supplier vendor, which is the new vendor that we created. Now you do need to assign them another role. So if I go to vendor portal administrator, they will also need to have the vendor external security role to actually be able to administer the contact. So while I'm here administering the user, I'm just going to add the vendor role as well, and this will give them the right permissions. So that might be something that you modify in terms of this particular process. So now that that's changed, I'm now going to simulate the user logging on. So this is then going to be the private site. You'll see that we've signed certificates, but this certificate being a machine on another domain, I'll get that error for the sake of the exercise. So I'm going to hit continue here. Now it's going to go and ask me to sign in, so I'm going to pick Azure ACS, which will be, now I can choose my Windows Live ID. And so in this particular case I can now sign in as my demo user, so we're going to sign in. So that's the important point here, is we're now using Windows Live ID to authenticate. We're not managing those accounts, so it's up to the user to maintain their password and things like that. Now that we've got access to the portal, I can go to the vendor portal, and you'll see that I can see details. I can have a look at contacts, and so from here I'm now a portal administrator. I could go and create new contacts, for example, and then set up user requests. So I can go and have a look at our products, supply the products, and start to use the portal as that vendor, and then whatever we do to modify it in terms of processes that we might want to modify, it gives you the capability to collaborate with that vendor. So that's a quick walkthrough of the basic process of setting up a new vendor and having them access the vendor portal in Dynamics AX 2012 R3 CU8.